Okay. We can
Yeah, yeah.
scan the person's brain who believes in God, and maybe we get evidence from their brain that confirms that they believe in God, right? That's not
Hmm.
necessarily
Hmm.
proof that God exists. But if we can look at trans people's brains and see that what they say about themselves is correlating with what is happening in their brain, then the evidence is like it's like a such smaller claim. The claim I am a woman is a much smaller claim than the claim God exists. Hi, I'm Luxander. Welcome to my channel. If you didn't know, I am a co-host on the YouTube channel The Line at Q&A Line here on YouTube. On Thursdays, we have the show TACUS, which technically is short for Transatlantic Call-In Show, even though Katie's no longer really on there. Anyway, so I was on with Dr. Ben recently, taking some calls, and we had a really interesting call that started with a person accusing us of being sexist and saying that our definition of gender is sexist. So this is that call. And if you want to see the full episode, I'll link it below, but this is just that clip. So check it out.
It says that we have a sexist definition of gender. Can you explain your position a bit more for us?
Yeah, thank you guys for taking my call as well. I appreciate it.
Totally.
So whenever I read on this like sort of new position of gender that it's meant to be very separate from sex, I often see this idea that gender is basically a socio-cultural construct, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so the definition I know of sexism, and I mean, you can also find it on a dictionary if you don't believe me. I mean, there's often multiple definitions for a word, but the one I've always, one of the ones that I've always associated with sexism myself is precisely relying on sociocultural stereotypes that are attributed to sex.
To do
So
what?
for me, redefining, for
Is that,
example,
I'm sorry, is that the
whatever.
extent of the
Sorry.
definition? Just relying on stereotypes? Because I
Well,
think the definition of
sorry. Let me
sexism is
pull the definition
reifying
here.
stereotypes in order
Behavior.
to maintain a hierarchy.
So behavior conditions or attitudes that foster stereotypes of social roles based on sex. And I believe that's what the new gender definition is doing, basically reducing either, well, these sort of boxes we're calling men, women, like it's sort of creating boxes.
See,
And then attributing
I disagree with your
sociocultural
definition,
stereotypes.
Dorian. See, I disagree
For
with your
sexism?
definition because yes, because
Okay,
I
yes,
believe
go
if
ahead.
we're going to use the word sexism, there is an
Yeah.
implied inequality in that. Like there has to be some inequality that is
I'm
created or
using
some kind of.
definition number 2 of sexism as a noun from Merriam-Webster dictionary.
So
If I'm being
just
honest, I'm not
having.
interested in arguing the dictionary definition of sexism.
Yes.
Like, because the dictionary definition often is not in line with the academic definition, and because we are both more academically inclined, Ben and I are going
Well,
to want to go with an academic definition of sexism. The academic
that can
definition of
be a bit
sexism,
debatable, but
Dorian,
sure, yeah.
we're gonna have a problem
Yes.
if I can't get a whole sentence out. Okay? I'm
Oh,
not
no, go
dealing with
ahead.
interruptions today. Thank you very much for being patient. So, when we are talking about sexism, we are talking about institutional hierarchical systems that force people into boxes in an oppressive way that denies them the full ability for their bodily autonomy and self-expression. So we take issue with the accusation that gender like fluidity or like the academic queer gender stuff that we talk about here or trans people in general are sexist because we as trans people especially and as trans activists in particular like we are constantly going against the sexist expectations, right? Like a sexist expectation is you are your biology, you have to adhere to that, and any like going off of that path is going to be punished. Can you kind of understand why we're having like a definitional difference here?
Do you have a reference of an academic definition that you would consider valid?
I
For
don't
example,
generally
the
rely
Moses
on
Medical
definitions
Dictionary.
to uphold my
Um,
arguments.
yes. So
Dorian, so
Moses
the
Medical
place that we're
Dictionary.
disagreeing, Dorian, the
Yeah.
place that we're disagreeing. So again, we don't
Yes.
really
Go ahead.
care about your citation of the dictionary. The core difference here is that we are saying that sexism implies some hierarchy or some inequality. So that is kind of the crux of what makes sexism sexism. The fact that gender is social is not sexist because that isn't implying inequality, oppression, hierarchy, etc. So are you suggesting that the fact that are you suggesting at all that trans people are causing inequality, hierarchy, oppression?
That we reinforce and want to support
Not
that.
not what I'm it's not what I'm suggesting, but it's hard to sort of get our ideas across if you rely on we rely on very different definitions of sexism. Whether like whose is the correct one, it's hard, not really
Do
easy to
you
tell. But it's hard
do
to
you agree that
communicate
sexism
what I
is
mean if you
hierarchical
disagree.
and structural?
I did not. Uh, did I disrespect you, or I don't? I did not hear that correctly. Sorry.
Does your working definition of sexism include intrinsically in itself the hierarchy and oppressive reinforcing of gender norms? Is that what you understand sexism to mean? That's what
Well, I think that
academically
could be
sexism is understood to mean.
a way to exercise like sexism, but like, for example, if I were to believe that a certain person has to act in a certain way just because they're male or female, I think that would be sexist.
Okay, maybe we
Because
can
Right.
just
based on
So
skip
their
past
that
sex,
this
is
I'm
because I see what your
attributing.
problem is here. So I think
yeah.
let's just skip past this because I think that our problem that we're running into is not that you think that trans people want to structurally uphold oppressive systems of hierarchy, but rather that like the way that we define our genders is inherently based in some kind of stereotype. So I'm going to jump past that and just jump to like trans people are very much in support of gender nonconforming behavior. I know transgender women who were assigned male at birth and who take estrogen and they have boobies now that they didn't used to have before. And they like to work on cars and they like to wear pants and they don't clean the dirt out from under their fingernails. So, like, my view and the view of generally trans people is that you can transgress gender norms freely and that is fine. And you identifying as a woman or man can be related to how you express your gender, but you're not required to do any of those things. And doing those things doesn't necessarily make you a man or woman. Like we were just talking to the previous caller, and Ben pointed out that a man can wear makeup and like there are people who do drag who are like, honey, I'm a man. I'm just doing this for fun. Like, I'm still going to be a man at the end of the day when I take all of this off, right? So we are of the opinion that you can do whatever the hell you want with your gender. And so I don't understand how that could be sexist by your definition of just like based in stereotypes.
Yeah, okay. That I appreciate your the way you put your perspective out in the table. I think, well, it could come to like some person might have a sexist definition of gender and sort of enact based on that to project their gender
Okay, the
out
fact
there.
that somebody has a
But
sexist definition does not mean
yeah,
that
sorry, but that's not
does
where I want
not
to
does
get. Yes, yes, it doesn't mean that
yeah, no. So
everybody does. Yeah.
don't give us someone else's position. Talk to us about your position and our position. So are you still upholding this idea that we're using a sexist
Well, from what you
that we're being
phrased
sexist in our
earlier,
approach to
it seems
gender?
like gender, well, from what you phrased earlier, that everybody has like sort of this ultimate freedom to express their gender regardless of how they like self identify or whatever. Say like a man could be wearing this or wear that or wear like anything or do anything in that sense. Is there really an actual sort of definition, or is it just sort of a word we enjoy to call ourselves by at this point?
Yeah, so the reason why we talk about gender being a social construct, that like I think people misunderstand what social construct means. Right? It doesn't mean that it's made up. It doesn't mean that there's no that it doesn't have any bearing on society. Like it's gender is essentially a model of how humans interact with each other based on um, different cultures and how they view essentially reproductive hierarchy is where it started. And since then, we've had to deal with, like we discussed, gender norms, gender stereotypes. But the whole concept is, how do we interact with the society around us? And so when we say it's a social construct, we aren't referring to like something super tangible like a human body or something, but it is a concept that can be studied, and it can be studied among cultures and among different people groups, and among subcultures. So it just being a social construct, it is a real thing as far as society goes, but it's not as concrete as, you know, biology. So I think maybe that's where we're missing each other.
I would
Is
also add
that
Yeah,
that
I mean
trans
that makes sense.
people are responding to that situation. Like, trans people are responding to a situation that already exists. So when I suggest to someone, "Hey, maybe try painting your nails or growing your hair out long and seeing if that makes you feel more at home in yourself and more comfortable," what I'm doing is describing the current framework, which is that we associate certain traits with feminine and masculine are associated with man and woman. And so, in order to kind of find where you feel most comfortable, you have to do that exploration within, to some degree, within the boundaries of the society that you live in. So, for me in America, dressing like a woman can mean something very different to what it means to dress like a woman in India, because we just have very different cultural norms, different expectations, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like I had
And
somewhere I was going with
so
that, but
yeah, no,
go
no,
ahead.
that's fine. Thank you for
I lost my
the
thought. Go
response.
ahead.
Um, well, I just kind of had a like there's some questions if you guys wouldn't mind clarifying for me. So one is, okay, there's this notion that, okay, gender and sex are sort of a completely separate thing now, um, and yet I see that a lot of the gender affirmation curve evolves around sex. So perhaps the people who I've encountered who promote gender as a completely separate thing are going maybe a bit it's a bit of a hyperbole thing, since the treatments often do revolve around sex. And
Well, Dorian,
in yes, sorry, go ahead.
so when you look at somebody and you interact with somebody in public, what kind of
Hmm.
things do you like if you see someone and you think that they're a woman, what kind of factors go into you thinking they're a woman?
Well, to phrase it in sort of the terms you guys would normally use, because I mean, typically I would use the term woman in the sense that it's used in most Swiss medical dictionary. But to put it in perspective, I don't look in using sort of like our modern sort of language on it. I don't look at people and guess if they're a woman or a man. I just guess their sex, and that's really it. I don't really care how they
Yeah.
express their
So
personalities and stuff. They should be allowed to express their personalities however they want. But
right, if you're in
often, what
public
I
and you
care for
see
a
if
human is typically age and sex.
yeah, but the thing is, if you're in public and let's say you're at a coffee shop, um,
Yeah.
are you going to, when you're going to call somebody she or to call somebody he, what are you thinking about when you're making that decision of, do I call this person she or do I call them he?
Well, typically I use sex-based pronouns. I don't tend to go by
Okay.
the gender notion
So
So
this
the
is
personally. I
why,
just,
reason
though.
if for me,
yeah,
sorry.
so Dorian, so this is why people end up changing factors related to their sex, apart from, uh, gender dysphoria is a
Yeah.
bit of a separate topic right now, but like, if you're living in a society with very strict gender norms, and people are making assumptions about who you are based on what your body looks like, you have a lot of reasons to feel like you have to change those things in order to be recognized and seen as legitimate, right? Like, if someone is walking around with a beard, they could absolutely be a woman, but it's a lot harder for them to be
Sure.
recognized as a woman. It's a lot harder for them to be treated like a woman when they have a beard. So that's why women, even cis women who have PCOS or have high levels of androgens, end up shaving. They end up getting hair removal because be they don't want to be called a man just because they have facial hair, right? So you I think ideally in a perfect world, a perfect system, we wouldn't be making these assumptions about people's gender based on their body. And
Oh,
so
I don't assume their
there
gender.
might
I
be more
assume their
people.
biology.
Well, there might be more people who don't want to change those sex-based characteristics as often because it doesn't have that weight for them. But we're in a society where those
Yeah.
factors do have weight. What you look like does have weight. And so we have to, like, we do live in a society where you can't escape those assumptions. So to say that the
Yeah.
definition doesn't make sense because people are making sex-based changes, uh, they're making a lot of those changes because of the world that we live in and the fact that they can't really escape that hierarchy that we already kind of established earlier. So does that make any sense to you, Dorian?
Yes, but then there is a like a sex aspect to the whole gender
How are you
definition, no?
determining someone's sex in public? Like, how are you when you're at the
Well,
coffee
it's hard
shop
to
and you're finding out
yes,
what to
it's
say
hard to
he or she?
praise.
What?
Like we all right. So we develop through evolution and natural selection, we have the ability to detect things on other people for our own sort of
Okay, but what factors? But
life.
what sex-based factors are exclusive to one sex or another?
Well, I mean, just generally speaking, I feel like
Especially what
mammals
factors
gotta
that
be
you
able
could
to.
see from being at a
Yes,
coffee
yes.
shop.
Like I'm not a
What factors could
biologist,
you
so it's
see by
hard
being at a coffee
to
shop
praise.
that would?
Well, it's sort of the
Yeah,
same
how?
way we detect age on other people. Like sometimes it's sort of important for our own context and interaction, like who we are
Yeah,
interacting
so
with, and we
Dorian,
can sort of pinpoint someone's age.
that's an assumption, right? Age, because you can be wrong about someone's age, right? You could guess
Yeah,
somebody is in their
definitely,
60s
definitely.
and they're
And sometimes
actually
I
in their
don't know
20s.
if the person I'm chatting with is male or female. Like
Right.
the
So what
system
I'm
that our
asking you
body
is
developed to
you
detect
said,
these things is not
right, so
super.
Dorian, so you're
Yeah.
saying that you rely on assumptions to guess what somebody's sex is. And so I'm asking you what
If
factors
I
of
can
someone's
guess, I
sex
ask, of
can you
course.
detect
Yeah.
reliably from just being in a coffee shop with them. So example, you can't see their genitals, you can't see their chromosomes, you can't
Yeah.
see their hormones. What factors are
Yeah.
you using to make that determination?
Well, there's a set of physical traits that tend to be associated more with one sex with the other, and that for most of the time
Okay,
ends up working out. And if I cannot
Are those
pinpoint the
exclusive to one
similar with
sex
age,
or another? Are those exclusive
sorry,
to one sex or another? Are those traits that you're talking about
some
exclusive
of
to
them
one sex?
maybe.
Which ones?
Um, yeah, well, some of the traits that I believe I'm thinking of right now, they can be probably attributed to both, and that's why if I cannot
So,
pinpoint it, I just ask. But most times and throughout
yeah, so then
my
you
whole
shouldn't.
life, I can
So
generally
so
pinpoint fine.
so give me examples. Give me examples. You're dodging the question. Give me those examples. What traits are you talking about that you use to determine somebody's sex?
Well, it can depend a little bit, but definitely, I mean, if the other person is not proactively trying to deceive my own natural sort of detection mechanism of
Just
sex,
give me the
then, because
examples. Just Dorian, I didn't
yes,
ask
yes,
for the
well, it can be
explanation. I
like
said,
body
give me the
morphology.
examples.
Yes, definitely, definitely. It
Right.
can be
So
body
explain.
morphology. It
What
can be
you
the
say
type of
body
voice.
morphology. Just explain exactly. Stop dodging my question. Give me the exact examples. Don't
Well,
just say
I'm
body
trying to answer.
morphology. What traits? What traits specifically? Are you talking about hip size? Are you talking about height? Are you talking about facial hair? Are you talking about body
Yes,
hair?
it could
Are
be.
you talking
Well,
about
it's the combination of all of
are
this
those
at once.
things?
Like
So all
everything,
those
everything.
things
I
are those
analyze
things
the entire
exclusive?
bodily the entire anatomy of the person from what I can see, and then
Okay, can you give me
my
statistics on how reliable those are? Give me data. How reliable are those things?
well, we can look at a. I believe you probably are familiar with the bimodal distribution curve, no? That plots phenotypes
Right,
distribution
it's by
across both
okay, so you're
sexes.
saying it's bimodal, right? It's bimodal, so there's a wide
Yes,
range of people that have traits in between. So my
yes.
concern is you're relying on an unreliable method to determine somebody's sex before you call them whatever
Well,
pronoun. So that in
if
my
you look
mind,
at the
that's
bimodal
called so if you
distribution, there's
don't have Dorian,
two
Dorian,
clear
Dorian,
peaks.
Dorian, if you make a determination before you have adequate data, that is called an assumption. You made an assumption based on what you
Yeah,
thought,
or
and
call it
that
a
could
guess.
be
That's
wrong.
fine too. Yes, and sometimes it could be wrong. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So
Yes, I'm
so
not
you're
saying I
relying on
know for sure every time I look at someone I can predict with, like, I'm not a like a DNA test, for example, right? Like it's
right.
definitely not
The fact
nearly
is,
as
so the
accurate
fact
as
is,
that for sure.
you're treating people based on an assumption that you have, and you very likely could be wrong. So you'd
Well,
be
I don't really treat
much
them
more
differently.
accurate if you just ask people. Because then you don't have to embarrass people. You don't have to make a fool of yourself and the other person by assuming that somebody with a beard is a man just because they have a beard, right? So this is why there is some of that
Well, it's
overlap
not just the
between
beard, right?
how
Like I would
society
have to
views
look at
sex
the
and how
facial
society views gender.
structure, the body.
But this is why. No, but do those things make somebody a man or a woman? Do those traits assign
So
somebody to man or woman?
if we can sort of go back to the bimodal distribution for a second, there's two peaks
No,
of
I'm asking you a
physical
question. I asked you a
characteristics that
question.
are very.
Do those traits make somebody a man or a woman?
I mean, those traits are not what make a person a man or a woman. And since I use the medical dictionary
Okay, so
definition for
you
man
don't
or woman,
know.
well,
So
let's
you
talk
don't
about male or
know.
female. I
So
don't
you
generally. I prefer not to use the.
Dorian, so you make assumptions. This is not based on
Well,
their
I look
sex
at
then.
evidence of the distribution, and then
You're treating them a certain way based on how they look to you, which is your assumption of their gender. You're not thinking about their sex at that point because the traits that you're looking at are not exclusive to one sex or another.
I
This is
muted
why we
him because he
separate
would not
sex
let
and
you get a
gender.
sentence out.
Yeah,
So feel free to get all
yeah.
your thoughts out there. Before I let you finish, if you want to support me directly, you can do that on Patreon, patreon.com/Luxander. All of my content is supported by users like you. And if you want to get some merch, like this enormous coffee mug or soup mug or whatever you use it for, check out my merch link in the description below.
Okay. No, but yeah, but this is why sex and gender are separate, because you can have parts of your body that are different from the way you interact with people around you. And we should be much more concerned with interacting with people around us and treating people with dignity than we should care about whatever traits that they didn't choose to have. Right? Like that's just an absolutely stupid way to look at humanity, is like traits that they can't control.
Okay, I'll unmute him now.
Yeah.
a very physically based.
And you never
I
stopped
don't know if
talking,
I'm
did
still
you?
online. No, I heard like a beep just
Okay.
now. I don't know what.
Lux,
Can
do
I
you have
jump
anything
in?
else to
I
jump
would
in on?
love
Yeah,
to
go
jump
for it.
in on this a little bit. Because so I am of the opinion that sex and gender are related to each other, and like it's like a socio-biological phenomenon. Like so when someone is asserting like, oh, you have sex-based pronouns, it's like, first of all, that's literally not how it works. Like, yes, they're related to each other, and we frequently associate sex with gender, but they clearly are not exactly the same thing. Otherwise, gender norms would be the same across all cultures, but they aren't. There are cultures where long hair is specifically a venerated trait for men, like some native cultures. And so my opinion is that they're related, and also that there is an amount of evidence that is not zero that indicates that trans people likely have an intersex condition because the brain develops a sense of what the body is supposed to look like. And so there is two different things going on here. There's the social aspect where you want to be recognized as the gender that you identify as. And there's also some amount of biological dysphoria where your brain seems to have an expectation that your body have certain parts. Like you, I'm sure you're familiar with brain body map, but for the audience, we are born with the programming in our brain to have two hands. If you are born without one of those hands, sometimes your brain is confused and it might generate some nerve systems for that hand, even though there's no hand there. And we're like, why does this happen? Well, because your brain has this kind of expectation for what your body map is going to look like. There is an amount of evidence that indicates that there might be some kind of biological component to being trans, which makes it really shitty for you to say, oh, you're sex-based pronouns, as though trans people have control over how they feel, or as though our brains and stuff are not a significant factor in our biology. I don't know. What say you to any of that, Dorian?
Well, I appreciate that your perspective, that you try to find a little bit of common ground, at least on the gender definition. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your elaboration as well. I sort of disagree that I've been called sort of stupid and shitty, because I don't, well, I don't mean to be, and I hope that at least pulls through, even though we're disagreeing on our conversation, that I'm sort of being pretty respectful to you guys in general, and
I
I'm just
mean,
trying
some
to
of
find
the things
dialogue.
that you believe are fundamentally disrespectful, and so Ben is responding to that, and I'm trying to bring us back down a little bit, but
Yeah,
you are saying things that are
yes,
just
thanks.
really, really rude, and you're being polite when you're saying it, but you are just also being rude, so I'm trying to kind
Okay.
of ignore that and get to the point.
So when I mean that I use, well, I use like sex-based pronouns for like myself or whatever. Like what I mean to imply by that, or suppose I just don't use pronouns at all. I generally just care for, I don't, I just care for physical properties of the universe, and I don't really like obviously I don't want to go around disrespecting people either. So if somebody tells me that their pronouns are this or that, then I just either use whatever pronouns they want me to use, or I simply use neutral terms all the time and avoid giving them a pronoun that it's not what they would want.
Well, that's rude.
But personally, I'm only invested in physically measurable things,
Do
and
you want me
I
to
can see
give
that
you some
you did
do you
mention.
need some
Sorry, go
research to
ahead.
rabbit hole your way into? Because if you're like, I'm only gonna believe it if it's factual and scientific, I can give you like some keywords so that you can find the research that indicates that trans people's physical, material, biological brains are different to cis people's
No,
brains.
yes, yes. I've seen some of that research as
So you're
well.
saying
The
that
brain
hold
is a
on,
bit of a
so here's
tricky
the thing is that
machinery
now
because.
I'm starting to get annoyed because you are
Oh,
saying
sorry, I
like,
don't mean to.
I'm only going to point to these like biological real sex things, and you're like, oh yeah, but
Well,
I
just
do know
really.
about that
Yeah.
research that indicates that being trans is like a physical biological intersex trait, and I'm just
Yes.
choosing to
So
disregard
we
that.
can definitely measure physical, like a physical state in the brain attributed to, for example, being trans. We can also do the same for people who are very, very religious, right? And I wouldn't necessarily interpret that as a manifestation of God through their brain or something, but we can definitely
Those are two
measure
completely
that
different
brain
claims.
state.
Okay, so
I
you
mean,
think that
I'm just
my
trying to say a
claim,
brain state is a
yeah,
measurable thing. Yes.
but those are not comparable because I'm like when I'm
Regardless
because
of
it's
what the
about a
idea
true.
is.
Oh my God, Dorian, it's about a
Sorry,
truth
sorry. Go ahead.
statement about the world. It's a truth statement about the world, right? If I say I'm a woman or a man, my truth statement about the world, like that's the extent of evidence that is required. Is like I say it about myself. We can do additional
Hmm.
brain scans to indicate that, like, yes, clearly, like I have these different brain structures. We can see the pleasure center in my brain light up when I'm being treated the way that I ask to be treated. Someone having a belief in God, like the parts of the brain that we see light up are again the kind of like it's just a pleasure association, but the claim is there is an like an omnipresent, omnipowerful God being that controls the universe. Like, so yes, they are both things that we can measure in the brain. Like I can also
Hmm.
measure how horny I am about men versus women. And we can look at my brain and see when my pleasure center lights up when I'm looking at those two different pictures or whatever. That doesn't
Yes.
mean that it only exists within the brain, and that doesn't discredit that
Hmm.
as strong evidence in favor of the existence of something. If the thing that I'm saying, this is evidence of the existence of something, trans people's brains lighting up when they are treated correctly, that is evidence for the claim that trans people are trans. Whereas my brain lights up when I think about God is not evidence for the claim that God exists. Do you see why I
Could
take
you
issue with your comparison there?
could you elaborate a bit further on why this? So somebody generally makes a claim that they believe. We measure that to be true according to their brain. Why? How can we just determine which ones are like true or not? Like if that's how they feel and we measure that to be true, then what's the? How
It's
can
true
we
that the
just
person who
determine
believes in
this ones
God
are
believes
good,
in
this ones
God.
are good?
So like the two different things that we're thinking of proving here, okay? We can
Yes, yes.
scan the person's brain who believes in God, and maybe we get evidence from their brain that confirms that they believe in God, right? That's not
Hmm.
necessarily
Hmm.
proof that God exists. But if we can look at trans people's brains and see that what they say about themselves is correlating with what is happening in their brain, then the evidence is like it's like a such smaller claim. The claim I am a woman is a much smaller claim. than the claim God exists. So yes, if we can measure in people's brains, like, hey, they seem to be, you know, say they have the estrogen pathways. It's like one of the things that I recently was reading about. Trans women have
Mm-hmm.
estrogen pathways in their brain that are similar to cis women's estrogen pathways in their brains. So we have physical structures that indicate what we have long believed, which is that there is some kind of brain component to this. So the evidence that we're looking for is, why are people trans? And then we can look in the brain and see, okay, there's evidence of it. And this completely disregards that people should have a personal choice about it. Like if they want to, if they don't have those brain structures, that doesn't mean that they're not trans, anything like that. I know Josie's going to yell at me
Yeah.
for this later. But so that's the issue that I'm taking, is like, when I say there's evidence of trans people being trans in our brains, and you compare that to, okay, well, people's brains light up when they think of God also, that's also not very polite, like, to put it nicely. It's
Sorry,
kind of a shitty thing
I
to
feel
say.
like I tend to
And
use
this
hyperbole
idea,
to maybe try and
Dorian,
illustrate my point better, but I don't mean to be disrespectful. So I'm sorry if the hyperbole
Do you
was
understand the
too
difference
far.
though? Like that's the point that I'm trying to, like, do you understand why those are not comparable?
Yes, definitely the God claim is a much larger claim that would require a lot more substantial evidence than just
And like,
the
I'm
brain
depressed
activity.
is also something that we just ask people about, and we believe them when they say it. So like, this is just
And
the level that we're at with human issues. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
there also I don't know if the audience is having trouble hearing me. They were saying that in the side chat, but
I boosted you earlier, so it should be better now.
Oh, you did. Okay. But there's also, you have to take into account the differences between like science is related to the brain and science is related to like the rest of the body in terms of psychology versus biology. They are measured differently because the thing, like your statement about well, I only think about things that are physically measurable, and like that is a very nebulous thing, because like how do you define, like how are you saying like we should measure psychological things? Like the techniques
That's a great
utilized
question. Yeah.
among social sciences and like biological sciences are different because of the subject matter being dealt with, right? Like it's, you can't use the same methods to like study psychology. You can't use like agar plates and like anatomy labs and stuff to evaluate psychology. These are different things. So what they do is they validate certain like questionnaires, they validate different study methods within psychology to demonstrate like results that can be replicated over and over again under the same conditions, right? And so just having something that's not as material as like biology doesn't mean that it's not legitimate, and doesn't mean that the results aren't legitimate. It's just that you have to measure those things differently. And there's, so I think there's a problem when you're saying that one field is legitimate because it can be measured in this certain way. Like, do you believe the entire field of psychology is bunk based on that? Or do you believe other things that are modeled in psychology?
Well, I don't believe that it's bunk, and I'm personally very grateful to the field in general because it has offered, like in my case, it has offered me a lot of help, generally speaking. And I don't mean to say that other fields are bunk. It's just, in my own understanding of things, obviously I try to be respectful, but for me it's a lot easier and sort of trust-wise that I'm able to measure physically something like gravity, like a flux of electrons, current, voltage, like anything I can prove.
See, Dorian, I also
physically,
don't
I'm a
really
huge
give a
fan.
shit about. I also really don't give a shit about your personal opinions on what is legitimate psychology and what isn't, because unless are
But
you an
you asked me
expert
about it. No,
in that
no need to
particular
be
field?
like mean about it. I'm only elaborating because you asked me what if I thought psychology
Dude,
was bunk.
Dude,
I don't think
you've
it is
been
bunk.
returning a similar level of aggression and won't even let me speak. So,
Really?
but you're
I
making
haven't been like
opinions
that.
based on
I'm
fields of
sorry if that.
study that you are not knowledgeable about, and so you're saying that one field is more easy to believe or is more legitimate than another because of your opinion.
I didn't say that.
And
I've never said that.
it's
I
kind
didn't
of
say
what you
the
are
other field wasn't
suggesting. It's
legitimate.
what you're suggesting in your argument, in suggesting that gender is less legitimate than sex because one is more physically measurable. Like, I don't know if you
Maybe
have
I phrased it wrong. I don't
like,
mean to
the
say it's
education in
legitimate, so I'm
psychology
sorry if
to
that's how it
decide.
came out.
No, I think you need to study more about psychology and sociology to understand what is this topic that you're opposed to. Like, there's a lot of depth within gender studies and how people like, there's
I
a
mean, that's
lot
why
of
I'm
working
calling you
models on
guys, so I
how
appreciate
people
your time.
arrive at a gender identity and all that. And I think there's more you need to learn about it before you throw out a whole field of expertise. Like, that just sounds very Dunning-Kruger of you a little bit.
I'm not trying to throw it out or anything, and I'm sorry if it seems that way. Perhaps a better way to phrase it is I have a much easier time understanding the fields that are measurable versus the ones that rely on subjective components, like asking people for something.
And again, what
And that's why
study
I'm
have
just
you done?
calling you
So,
guys,
so if
because
you
you
have an
guys
issue, so if you have
clearly
an
know
issue
it better than
understanding
I. So I'm
something,
just
Dorian, if you've had an issue understanding the
sure.
depth in psychology and sociology, what have you done to study those things and to educate yourself better on that? Or have you just said, you know what, I don't know much about this and I don't really care to, so I'm just going to pretend like I know enough. Like, there's a certain, if you actually cared about learning about this, there's a lot of
Yeah.
study you could do in finding out these answers instead of just writing them off as less legitimate than biological sciences. Like, and
Well,
that's
no,
what I
but
see
I never
happening.
said
And
they were
that's,
legitimate,
there's
and
an
I'm not
issue
writing
with
them
that.
off like that. I
You're saying
never
that you're
said
not.
that. And I said and I apologize if that's how it came across, because it's not what I meant to put out there for you guys. And I'm calling you guys because you guys are clearly more familiar with this field than I am. And I've tried definitely to look into it, but it's harder what I can do and find on my own versus asking you guys. So if you obviously have references or things you'd
Right. So if it's
definitely
hard
like
to
advise me to
find,
look
so if
at,
it's
I'd be
harder to
happy to
learn,
write them down.
if it's harder to learn that stuff, Dorian, if it's harder to learn that stuff, maybe your approach shouldn't be to have an answer going in, and maybe your thought should be, I need to
It was
learn
a
more about
question
this.
going in.
And that's why your perspective has been kind of seen as hostile, and why we maybe respond a bit more firmly is because you came in with a strong opinion. You came
I
in
mean,
with
Sure.
an
I
argument,
may have come in with a strong opinion
right?
very respectfully,
You
and I
didn't come
understand
in
that
to learn, you
it's a
came
strong opinion.
in to argue with us about it. So you had an opinion, and
Well,
you
because
were
you guys
firm on
know
that
about it,
opinion.
so I
I
wanted
just
to know what you guys thought.
I
I
just want
wanted
to
to know
clarify. I
about
just
your
want to
knowledge.
clarify really quick, Dorian. You came in
Yeah.
here with none pronouns. You
Yeah.
exist in a society. You understand how this works. You understand that you, as a person who presents as a masculine individual based on your voice and your name, is the assumption that I'm making. You know full fucking well that you use he, him pronouns, that's how everybody in your life talks to you. So you started off on the wrong foot
People
by,
could call me they, them, or
Dorian,
she, her.
girl.
I don't mind. Yes.
But okay, pronouns are like your name. It's what you go by in your everyday life. Do you go by she or they? Do you ever tell people to use she or they? Or do they use he, him, and you let them do that because that's what you're fine with?
When they ask me, I tell them they can use whatever they like, and they oftentimes
not the
go
question.
by he, him. Other times, yes, it's because I'm indifferent. So they could call me whatever, and it doesn't mean anything to me.
So when
Personally,
people
I know
assume,
I've
when people
friends
assume your
that it
pronouns are
matters
he,
to them, so I
him,
use whatever pronoun.
when people
Yeah.
assume your pronouns are he, him, do you correct them? Or do you not say anything
I
because
don't have
that is what you
anything
go
to
by?
correct. They could also assume I'm she, her, and I would also have nothing to correct. They could also assume I'm ze, zer, or they, them, and I would have nothing to correct either.
Okay,
I'm completely
maybe this is an
indifferent to
issue
them.
where you just don't know a lot about the community, because if you are a person who's genuinely open to all kinds of gendered terms, what we usually say is any/all, which is to say, like,
Okay,
that indicates an openness to
sure.
exploration, or at least that you don't care. So I'm just
Any slash
explaining, when
all.
you come in with
Sure.
none, that does make it seem like you reject the entire premise that people's pronouns could be in
But
any
that's
way
an assumption.
separate from. Oh, hold on. I'm telling
Yeah.
you what the existing framework is. Just like I, as a trans
Yeah.
person, am responding to the existing framework of gender, I'm explaining to you, as
Yeah.
somebody who has these conversations
Okay.
basically every week, that when people come in and they say none pronouns, what they are basically communicating, and what you have actually said in this conversation, is that pronouns are
Mm-hmm.
based on sex, and that and that there is an implied in here, a rejection of the idea that you can use pronouns that do not correspond with your biological sex or with what people assume your biological sex to be. Does that make, are you understanding that that's the existing framework and how like your argument
Yes.
here
Can I try
has
to
been consistent?
fix some of
Your,
that framework? Because
yeah,
maybe I put out
if you
the way I phrased
disagree,
myself, it came out wrong maybe a few times. If that's the
sure.
framework.
And like I understand that you probably are like English is not your first language based on your accent, or so I'm just like I'm giving you a latitude. I
Yeah, that's
understand
fine.
maybe that there is a language barrier, but please, if you want to explain yourself,
Sure.
go for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, by none, I didn't mean to present it like as such an anti-thesis to the whole pronoun stuff. If now that you mention it to me, if saying none seems very, like it has some negative connotation to it, then I'll definitely use any/all from now forward. I tend to just spend a lot of time reading, not in these circles, if that makes sense. I spend a lot of time sort of by myself, and I just read math and physics things. So I'm not familiar with that terminology, but I appreciate that you've made it clear now. So next time if I ever engage in another discussion where I have to discuss my pronouns, I can say any/all, so that
So I
it's
do
not
want to get a
perceived
clarification from
negatively
you
when I say no.
now that we're
Yeah.
at this place in the conversation. So when you say for you in your daily life, pronouns are sex-based, is that you basically saying like you generally don't want to acknowledge people's pronouns if their appearance doesn't match what you reflexively want to use?
No, and that probably came out wrong. The way I should probably phrase it better, because it's not that I just use sort of the idea of sex-based pronouns whenever sort of it pleases me. I do have friends and people that I know that are trans or they have a different gender than what would be associated with their gender birth or whatever. So and for people that I don't know as well, like there's also like I have both friends and acquaintances and people I know of and stuff like that. So in all degrees of like people that I know that use a different pronoun, I just use the pronoun they ask me to use. I don't oppose it. Like I just say whatever pronoun they want me to use. Or I just don't use the pronoun and I try to be really neutral with the way I address them.
Okay,
So
I
I
appreciate
don't
that
try
you
to
endeavor
cause
to
them
be
any
respectful.
discomfort in general.
I do
Yes,
appreciate
yes,
that
I
you
always try
endeavor
to
to
be
be respectful.
respectful. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate you
So-
guys for chatting about this with me as well.
Yeah, and we are getting toward the end of our time.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
I
fine.
would
I
love
think it's
to
a good spot.
revisit. If you wanted to call back next week, I'm going to be on with Josie. And if you still are feeling like trans people's definition of how we define gender is like sexist or like based in stereotypes or generalizations, like I would be happy to come back around to that if you felt like that wasn't adequately addressed, because I know we did kind of get off in the weeds a little bit. But it has been a very enjoyable and vigorous conversation. Dorian, if you want to get your last word in before we go, I'll give you the moment.
I just want to thank both of you for your time and your knowledge. And if you do have any specific books or references that you would recommend me, it'd be great to just have.
Yeah, in the chat right now, if you look in the chat, Calacia has been posting the link to a research document, basically. So that's one that we recommend if people want to read more into it. So that should be in the chat, or maybe I have to scroll up a little bit to find it. But yeah, it was a link from Calacia in the chat.
I'll look on the chat, and maybe somebody else also was dropping some docs there, maybe.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll
Appreciate
keep an eye out
Dorian.
on the chat. No, I appreciate you, both of you. Thank you.
So that call was maybe not as spicy as we sometimes get. It was not the spiciest of calls, but I hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you want to check us out on Transatlantic Call-In Show on Takis Live, that's on Thursdays on @Q&A Line here on YouTube at 2 p.m. Central Time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. YouTube really loves it when you comment and when you click share. So thank you so much for all of your support, everybody. Time for the patron credits. Happy New Year, and thank you so much to my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Untitled One, Pinky Bimbo, In a Box, Sarah A., Amanda B., Michelle Winter, Athiette, Nova, Danielle McDonald, Kevin Young, Suzanne Maynard, Liam Hodgson, Jamie Jam, Michelle Frateroli, Logan, Celeste, Mr. Atheist, Wellington Marcus, Desi Quiche, Nadia Yvette Chambers, Ing Marie, Ali T, Kawhi Esquire, Bo E, Art, Neurospiky, JT, and Solomon Kane.